Good morning and good afternoon, everybody out there in YouTube land. Glad to have you with me today. All my peeps in the chat room, all my lurkers, and everybody that'll view it on Memorex later. Happy to have you with us today. It's a pretty day here in Indiana, mid-70s and just a slight breeze. I don't think it's going to get a whole lot hotter today, but you can tell that fall is setting in, and today is the first day of it according to the calendar. So happy first day of fall to everybody. I wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow, Friday, the show will be on Memorex for you. I'll get up early in the morning and get it recorded so that it's here for you. I have a big day tomorrow setting up for a festival, so I'll be on the run. But we'll be back live then on Monday, and who knows what'll happen, over the weekend. I've got the festival to do during the days, but seems like the evenings are full of riots and all kinds of things. So who knows? I may be bringing something live if there's anything that crosses my path that I think I can bring to you. But we have some news to give you today, and I'll just jump right on into it. The first one here is off of Liberty Writers News. It says Red October's here. Obama gives order to begin the UN gun takeover starting next month. Obama only has a couple months left of being president, but this loser isn't done crapping on the Constitution before he leaves. He wants to take away the Second Amendment. The American people are standing up, though, and starting to vote for Trump, but look at the plan that Obama is preparing to hatch with the UN. He plans to take your guns, folks. Here's how Obama is going to take our guns before Trump gets in office. Number one, he is forming a limit on the types of firearms that Americans can purchase. It will be masked in a United Nations arms treaty. It is currently being written as a way to prevent drug trafficking from being allowed to illegally purchase heavy weapons and small arms. The word small arms is included in the treaty and is most likely used to describe handguns, shotguns, and rifles. The NRA warned about this treaty. This treaty threatens individual firearm ownership with an invasive registration scheme and is full of regulations and requirements that are blatant attacks on the constitutional rights of every law-abiding American. The treaty does this in part by urging record-keeping of end users, directing importing countries to provide information to an exporting country regarding arms transfers, including end use or end user documentation for a minimum of 10 years, the NRA warned. This is bad, folks. We need to vote Trump quickly before it's too late. And then it wants me to click here to go to the next page of this, so we'll click on the next page because that's supposed to give the final two stages of Obama's plan. And I'm trying to get her to load. And it's taking a second here. Little hamster running in his wheel today, trying to keep the computer running. Okay, it says number two, he is using the UN to do it. As at a recent Geneva conference, U.S. Delegate William Malzahn told the international community that Obama is in full compliance with the treaty. Here's what he said exactly. The United States remains committed to the arms treaty, which we signed in September of 2013. On the package to transmit the treaty to the U.S. Senate for its advice and consent to ratification. It is not clear when we will complete this, but we are actively working on it. Malzahn stated, it says, as we pursue ratification, let me assure everyone that the United States is already fully compliant with the requirements of the Arms Trade Treaty as the U.S. national control system exceeds those requirements. The only thing standing in front of Obama is the senators having to ratify the treaty. If Democrats take over the Senate in November, the treaty could easily be ratified. End of Second Amendment in the United States. Vote Trump or lose the Second Amendment. And then it goes on for another page, but I think, we've got the gist of this. What's going on. So I would encourage everybody to contact their senators and tell them, ratify this. The next one that we have is off the Washington Post. And it is on the protest. I'm trying to get it to come up here. And this is a several part article or part of the news brief I'm giving you. So bear with me. This is Charlotte police shooting victim was armed with a gun, not a book, the chief says. Charlotte, protest erupted over the fatal police shooting of a black man. Officials here call for peace while stressing that the man was armed and posing an imminent deadly threat. When officers shot and killed him Tuesday near the University of North Carolina at Charlotte campus. 16 police officers and numerous protesters were injured in the two sides as the two sides clashed overnight, hours after Keith Lamont Scott was fatally shot by an officer from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Scott's family insisted he was not armed when he was killed outside the apartment complex, instead saying he was reading a book in his car at the time of the fatal encounter. A detail seized by protesters in the Charlotte and on social media. On Wednesday, at a news conference, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Kerry Putney said the officers were searching the previous afternoon for a suspect who had outstanding warrants when they spotted Scott, who was not the suspect they were seeking, emerged from a vehicle armed with a handgun. The officers gave loud, clear verbal commands instructing Scott to drop the weapon, the chief said. In spite of verbal commands, Mr. Scott exited his vehicle armed with a handgun as the officers continued to yell at him to drop it. He stepped out, posing a threat to officers, at which point Putney said an officer fired his service weapon, striking 43-year-old Scott, who was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. It's time to change narrative because I can tell you from the facts that the story is a little bit different as to how it's being portrayed so far, especially through social media, Putney said. So Charlotte, the challenge is ours. Following the shooting, a large crowd of protesters gathered near the university campus. Demonstrations began peacefully with some people chanting Black Lives Matter and Hands Up, Don't Shoot. News reports and protests on social media later showed police in riot gear firing tear gas and rubber bullets at the protesters and some people smashing out the windows of police cars. Said the violent overnight demonstrations stem from lingering frustrations over previous police shootings in the city, including a deadly encounter in 2013 when Jonathan Farrell, an unarmed black man, was shot and killed by a white police officer. Hours after Scott's death, demonstrators shut down traffic on Interstate 85. Some opened up the backs of tractor trailers, took out boxes, and set them on fire in the middle of the highway. WSOC reported. The station spoke to one truck driver who said people stole cargo from her trailer. People reportedly used flash grenades to break up the crowd and cleared the highway by early Wednesday morning. A few dozen others broke down the doors of nearby Walmart, then dispersed when the authorities arrived, according to the news station. The police chief told reporters that 16 officers were injured during the demonstration. One of them hit in the face with a rock. The extent of the officers' injuries varied, Putney said Wednesday. At least 11 people were taken from the demonstrations and treated for life-threatening injuries, hospital officials told the news station. Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch called on protesters to remain peaceful, criticizing the violence that injured law enforcement officers and demonstrators alike. Protest is protected by our Constitution and is a vital instrument for raising issues and creating change, she said during remarks at the conference Wednesday morning in Washington. But when it turns violent, it undermines the very justice that it seeks to achieve, and I urge those demonstrating in Charlotte to remain peaceful in their expressions of protest and concern. North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory, Republican, said Wednesday that his office will do everything we can to support the mayor and police chiefs in their effort to keep the community calm and to get this situation resolved. It's very important that we work together as a team to solve a very difficult issue and to bring peace and resolution. He added, my prayers are with the Scott family and also our law enforcement, especially the 16 police officers who were injured last night. As governor, I'm going to do everything I can to support the entire city leadership in their effort to resolve this situation. Putney, the police chief, said officers were searching for a suspect Tuesday afternoon at the Village of College Downs apartment complex. Police said Scott had been sitting in a parked car at the apartment complex and then exited the vehicle holding a firearm. As police officers approached, Scott again emerged from the car with the firearm and posed an imminent deadly threat to the officers, who subsequently fired their weapons, striking the subject, police said. Scott was transported to the Carolinas Medical Center where he was pronounced dead. Detectives said they recovered the firearm Scott was holding during the fatal encounter and were interviewing witnesses Tuesday night. Police declined to comment on the make and model of the firearm. Putney said he was uncertain whether Scott's weapon was loaded or whether he had pointed it directly at the officers. He also said investigators did not find the book referenced by Scott's family. Authorities identified the officer who shot and killed Scott as Brentley Benson, who has worked for the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Force since July 2014. He has been placed on paid administrative leave pending an investigation, which is standard procedure in officer-involved shootings. Vincent is also black, authorities told the Washington Post. Putney said officers, I'll try it again. Putney said the officer was in plain clothes wearing a vest with a police logo, but was accompanied by other officers in full uniform. The police chief also said that the officer was not wearing a body camera, but that other officers on the scene were. Wednesday morning, he said he had not yet watched the footage in its entirety. A woman who identified herself as Scott's daughter said her father was unarmed and reading a book in his car when the police shot and killed him. In a widely circulated Facebook Live video, she said Scott was parked and waiting for a school bus to drop off his son when the police arrived. Officers used a stun gun on him, then shot him 4 times with their service weapons, she said. She added that Scott was disabled. My daddy didn't do nothing. They just pulled up undercover, she said in the video. A police spokesman declined to comment on the video. Charlotte Mayor Jennifer Roberts said the city will conduct a full investigation into the shooting and promised transparency. She told reporters Wednesday that authorities would release information as soon as allowed to dispel inaccurate accounts circulating widely on the media and elsewhere. Scott is one of at least 702 people who have been fatally shot by police so far this year, 163 of them black men, according to the Washington Post database tracking fatal officer-involved shootings. This city was scene of another high-profile police shooting in September 2013 when Charlotte Mecklenburg officers fatally shot Jonathan Farrell, a 24-year-old black man who had crashed his car in a residential neighborhood several miles from the complex where Scott was killed. Officer Randall Carrick fired 12 rounds at Farrell, who was unarmed, striking him 10 times. Police said Farrell ignored officers' instructions. Last year, during Carrick's trial, while most jurors voted to acquit the officer, 4 had voted to convict him, and after a judge declared a retrial, the state said it would not seek another trial. Farrell's family and the city of Charlotte settled a lawsuit stemming from the shooting for a reported $2.25 million. Jibril Ho, a local activist who organized protests during Carrick's trial, said the Farrell shooting was not as explosive as this week's fatal encounter, but that it weathered on us. What happened is that 9 times out of 10, the cop will get off. He'll get paid leave. He'll get early retirement. He'll basically get paid for the killing, he said. Nothing is being done to really change anything. What you're seeing is people have been put in that situation for so long, and they're tired of talking, he added. They're tired of talking, and candlelight vigils and dialogue, and nothing's getting done. In 2015, a 20-year-old black woman, Janisha Fonville, was shot and killed by Charlotte-Mecklenburg police as officers responded to a domestic dispute. Police later said Fonville was holding a 6 to 8 inch knife and lunged toward them, prompting an officer to open fire, striking Fonville. Fonville's girlfriend said the woman was unarmed. Charlotte Councilwoman Luana Mayfield, Democrat, said the mood in the city this week is one of sadness, pain, and loss. We know as a community and a society where this anger is coming from, she said. You have more than several individuals, specifically Latinos and African Americans, who have had interactions with police that have loss of life. Mayfield said that she posts in Mayfield said that the posts in Charlotte have been fueled in part by long simmering frustrations from previous police shootings. Farrell in 2013 and Fonville last year. Scott's death, she said, added accelerant to an emotionally charged fire. This is the pain of the nation, not just African Americans, but the pain of the entire nation to see the injustice before them, Mayfield said. Scott's death came just one day after police in Tulsa released video of an officer shooting and killing an unarmed black man who had gotten out of a stalled SUV. Terrence Crutcher, age 40, was standing on the side of the road by a broken down vehicle on Friday evening when officers arrived and ordered him to show his hands. Police said they tasered and shot Crutcher after he refused to obey officers' commands and reached into the driver's side window of the SUV. But video released Monday showed Crutcher walking with his hands in the air, and an attorney for the man's family said the vehicle window was rolled up when the officer opened fire. Police said they found PCP in the vehicle, but no weapon. Lynch, the attorney general, said the recent shooting in Charlotte and Tulsa again laid bare friction between law enforcement officials and the regions they police. These tragic incidents have once again left Americans with feelings of sorrow, anger, and uncertainty, Lynch said. They have once again highlighted in the most vivid and painful terms the real divisions that still persist in the nation between law enforcement and communities of color. Lynch spoke 2 days after the Justice Department began a civil rights probe into the Tulsa shooting, and she said that federal officials were in touch with local authorities beginning their investigation into Scott's death in Charlotte. And there's pictures and stuff in this if you want to take a look at these. All these URLs are in the description of the video. So and the next one is also on the writing. It says, this is on foxnews.com. It says Charlotte officials appeal for calm on Thursday, hours after violent riots stemmed from a controversial police shooting of a black man, injured several police officers and civilians, and resulted in 44 arrests. North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory declared a state of emergency at 12:30 a.m. and called in the National Guard after Charlotte's police chief said he needed the help. Saw last night are not the Charlotte I know and love, Mayor Jennifer Roberts said. They are not reflective of our community, of the deep-seated traditions we have of collaboration and peace. Roberts called for a full, transparent investigation of the police shooting of 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott on Tuesday. However, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Care Putney, it was unlikely video of the incident would be released to the public. Putney said Scott's family had asked to see the video and authorities were trying to accommodate that. What started out as a prayer vigil after Scott's shooting turned into an angry march and then a night of violence. A man was shot and critically wounded as protesters charged police in riot gear trying to protect an upscale hotel. Video obtained and verified by the Associated Press, which was recorded last night after the shooting, shows someone lying in a pool of blood as people scream and a voice yells for someone to call for help. People are then told to back up from the scene. Demonstrators shouted "Black Lives Matter" and "Hands up, don't shoot," while cursing at officers with bicycles blocking intersections. As the protesters approached the Omni Hotel, officers in riot gear lined up outside arm in arm, and a few marchers threw bottles and clods of dirt. After the shooting, police began firing flash grenades and police then fired tear gas and the crowd of hundreds dispersed. Marchers left. Police in riot gear then began marching arm in arm through downtown Charlotte intersections, shooting tear gas at people who charged them. At least one protester knocked down a CNN reporter during a live shot. Putney defended his officers' actions in an interview with Fox News' Megyn Kelly on the Kelly File. First, the crowd, Putney said, we've been very patient, but now they've become very violent. Officials have refused to release video of the shooting of Scott by Officer Brentley Benson, who is also African American, and two starkly different versions have emerged as a result. Disregarded repeated demands to drop his gun, while neighborhood residents say he was holding a book, not a weapon, as he waited for his son to get off the school bus. Chief Putney said the police version of Tuesday's shooting was based on evidence and testimony from eyewitnesses. We're just going to present the facts and let the justice system run its course, he told the Kelly File. He told news conference that the officers were serving arrest warrants on another person when they saw Scott get out of the vehicle with a handgun. Plainclothes officer wearing a vest emblazoned police shot Scott after the officer and other uniformed members of the force made loud and clear demands that he drop the gun, the chief said. Putney was adamant that Scott posed a threat and point his weapon at officers and said the gun was found next to the dead man. I can tell you that we did not find a book. Neighbors, though, said that the officer who fired was white and that Scott had his hands in the air. There were hints earlier Wednesday that Charlotte would suffer a second night of destruction as Putney, who is black, Mayor Jennifer Roberts, who is white, stood at City Hall and appealed for calm. African American leaders who said that they were speaking for Scott's family held their own news conference near where he was killed Tuesday, reminding the crowd of other shootings and abuses of black men. Who runs a civil rights group called True Healing Under God, or Thug, warned that the shooting video might be a way for the police to regain the community's trust. Just telling us this is under investigation is not good enough for the windows. The North Carolina NAACP said in a statement early Thursday that it stood with those mourning in Charlotte, called on city officials to be fully transparent with any video or information that could bring light to the Scott shooting. On Tuesday night, dozens of demonstrators threw rocks at police and reporters, damaged squad cars, closed part of Interstate 85, and looted and set on fire stopped trucks. Used tear gas to break up protests. 16 officers suffered minor injuries. One person was arrested. The violence broke out shortly after a woman who appeared to be Scott's daughter posted a profanity-laced hour-long video on Facebook saying her father had an disability and was unarmed. There's that article. Then we have this one. This is off of Right Scoop, and it says, disgusting. Charlotte rioters try to toss unconscious photographer into a fire. Tweets on this from Mike Hansen and Jonathan Jones. Mike Hansen is from WCNC. He says one of our crews was attacked in Uptown. Cameraman taken by ambulance to a hospital. And then Jonathan Jones says WCCB is reporting a few people tried to put news photographer into a flaming trash can. And there's a video of this, and I think I can show it here on screen share so that you can see what they're talking about. Okay, we'll get this playing and get it blown up here so you can see it. There's no audio. Now you can see police are pulling him back to get him away from the fire. Okay, so there you have that. Now, let me get my screen back here. There we go. I mean, what is this supposed to solve? I don't understand. Well, I do understand. I mean, it's not going to solve anything. The protesters are protesters and agitators are agitators. And while all this is going on, what's going on behind the scenes? Oh, that's right. Obama's taking our Second Amendment rights away from us. He's in a gun grab with the UN. That's right. Here's off the Daily Caller. It says, breaking news, judge orders release of Clinton security training docs to be given or to begin in 5 days. And this reads, a frustrated federal judge ordered the State Department to begin producing within 5 days hundreds of documents on or recommended security training briefings or courses were completed by former Secretary of State Clinton and her top aides. Judge Richard Leon ruled Tuesday in favor of the Daily Caller News Foundation by rejecting the State Department's motion to dismiss the DCNF's Freedom of Information Act lawsuit concerning production of the documents originally sought under the Freedom of Information Act, but he also denied the DCNF's request to depose State Department officials. The State Department has been unable to produce any records confirming that Clinton and her top aides received mandatory annual security briefings about the proper handling of classified materials and the proper methods for conducting secure communications. In addition to Clinton, the DCNF seeks the same records for the former Clinton Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills, Deputy Chief of Staff Huma Abedin, and advisor Jacob Sullivan. Leon has been impatient with the State Department foot dragging in releasing the documents. He ordered the department to release 1/3 of the 400 documents by September 26th and the rest of them by October the 10th. Bradley Moss, one of the attorneys representing the DCNF, said Judge Leon's order made clear his frustration with the State Department's continued obstruction of the Freedom of Information Act process. State will either meet his deadline or face the consequences of failure. FBI Director James Comey told reporters in a July 7th news conference he had regarded the former Secretary of State as a careless federal official when she set up private and unsecured email server in her New York home. Comey did not end up recommending prosecution of the former Secretary of State. National Security Agency officials were aghast to learn early in Clinton's term that she insisted on using an unsecured personal BlackBerry phone within the confines of her State Department office. Unsecured digital devices are banned from the Secretary's office. The State Department officials admitted in July 29th response to the DCNF that their failure to produce the requested documents meant the courses were not completed by Clinton or her aides. Department officials balked at searching computer hard drives in Clinton executive offices or in security offices where security awareness training is arranged for all the department's 45,000 employees and foreign service officers. In an August 31st hearing, Leon told Justice Department Attorney Jason Lee that the document should be released before the November election. I'm sure you can appreciate, Mr. Lee, there is a certain time sensitivity on this issue, Leon said. We're looking down the barrel of a presidential election from now in 2 months. So there's that article about her documents. The next one I have is off of EEnews.net, and it says Oregon standoff. Bundy convictions vital to U.S. crackdown on land militants. The trial of leaders of the armed standoff at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge represents a make or break moment in the government's efforts to quash a radical anti-public lands movement in the West. If the government fails to secure convictions in the Portland, Oregon proceedings that began last week, it could embolden their followers to stage more protests of federal land management policies. It is extremely important that our justice system come through and convict these guys, said former Interior Deputy Secretary David Hayes. Hayes added that the trial needs to send a message to defendant Ammon Bundy, the leader of the 41-day armed standoff, and his supporters. Consequences to a physical takeover of a public land, this is what they want, says Hayes, who is now a law professor at Stanford University. They want to whip up a sense of entitlement to take actions that are clearly illegal. Well, says he, okay. Observers added that the trial is also an opportunity for the government to make up for what many characterized as a failed response to the 2014 standoff at the Bundy's Ranch in Bunkerville, Nevada. There, Bundy's father, Cliven, met an armed rebellion against Bureau of Land Management officials over a roundup of cattle due to $1.1 million in unpaid grazing fees. Out of concern for the safety, federal officials ultimately backed down, though Cliven Bundy and his sons faced separate trials on charges stemming from that event. The high-profile nature of the current case may explain why federal prosecutors opted to charge the defendants with conspiracy, a charge that veteran attorneys say is typically easier to prove in front of a jury. Specifically, the government charged 26 occupiers with conspiracy to impede federal officials through threats, intimidation, or force during the standoff that ended February 11th. The current trial is for 7 defendants, 5 of whom also face charges of possession of firearm on federal property. Conspiracy is felony, and if convicted, the defendants will likely face several years in prison. However, the government is likely could have filed more significant charges, including trespassing or domestic terrorism. It also did not file significant destruction of government property charges, even though officials have said the occupation has cost taxpayers some $9 million. Vermont Law School professor Pat Parentague said prosecutors have discretion over what charges are filed. In this case, the U.S. Attorney's Office likely didn't want to overcharge, meaning which it would be difficult to persuade any jury to convict. If anything, prosecutors likely wanted to undercharge, he said. An acquittal, Parento said, would be a disaster. Conspiracy has long been a favorite among prosecutors. In a federal judge Learned Hand famously called conspiracy in the darling of the modern prosecutor's nursery because of its advantages. To prove conspiracy, the bar relatively is low, said Tung Yin of Lewis and Clark Law School, who has been following the case. Prosecutors need only show that there was agreement to commit an unlawful act, that there was some sort of overt act toward furthering the conspiracy. The government need not prove, however, that every member of the conspiracy agreed to every part of the conspiracy. The act taken to further the conspiracy, moreover, doesn't itself need to be legal or need to be illegal. What makes it powerful is that the government doesn't have to prove that these guys actually impeded government employees, Yin said, only that they agreed to do so. And the agreement doesn't need to be formalized or in writing. Reams of Facebook data taken from the defendant's accounts so important to the prosecutor's case, Ian said. Last week, the government spent days introducing posts from those accounts in which the defendants instructed followers to come to the refuge and to bring their guns. Kevin Sally, a Portland-based criminal defense attorney, said the conspiracy charge allowed the prosecution to cast a wide net in charging many of the occupiers. Sally said, once you prove that people agreed to do something unlawful, that's it. That may explain why 11 of the 26 people charged pleaded guilty to the charge, including Ryan Payne, another leader of the standoff. Several others asked to have their trial delayed. They are due in court in February. Michael Bloom, another law professor at Lewis and Clark, said the prosecutors may also be motivated by another factor, that Ammon Bundy, his brother Ryan, and other defendants refused to plead guilty. U.S. attorneys, he said, dislike expending resources on cases where there is overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt, as there is here due to the voluminous Facebook data and media coverage of the standoff. The defendants, he said, could have faced reduced prison time if they had pleaded guilty, because they didn't. Prosecutors will likely seek maximum sentences in the trial that is expected to last 2 to 3 months. Instead, Bloom said, it appears the Bundys are looking to advance their protest over federal land ownership via the trial, even though the federal district judge Anna Brown repeatedly admonished lawyers last week for bringing up the subject because it is not relevant to the charges. Bloom added that there simply is no legal basis for the Bundys' constitutional argument over federal land ownership. He says that train sailed 175 years ago. Wow. Hard to believe that these people don't want to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That we have sunk that low. Holy moly. Next one we have here, speaking of the Bundy's case, Mark McConnell, man driving Jeep before Ammon Bundy's arrest, was an informant, testimony reveals. I think all of us that have been following this kind of knew that's what was going on all along, especially after the shooting of Lavoie took place, but it's nice to know that now we have it in writing. This is off of Oregon Live. It says, Mark McConnell, the driver of the Jeep that Ammon Bundy was riding in before his arrest on January the 26th, was government informant who had tipped off law enforcement about the occupation leader's trip out of the wildlife refuge, according to court testimony on Wednesday. Oregon State Police Trooper Jeremiah Beckert said that McConnell provided information about the occupiers' vehicles, their location, the basic threat assessment leading to the high-risk traffic stop on US 395 about 4 p.m. that same day. Beckert, unmarked police pickup truck waiting in a snow park off the rural road when he saw a white Dodge pickup belonging to occupation spokesman Robert Lavoie Finicum and a Jeep go by northbound. He activated the lights on his truck and hit the siren a few times as he moved in behind the Jeep. Beckert, testifying in the federal trial against Ammon Bundy and 6 co-defendants stemming from 41-day occupation at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Harney County, described the traffic stop and the arrest of Ammon Bundy and Brian Cavalier from the Jeep. He also spoke of the subsequent arrests of Brian Bundy and Shauna Cox after Finicum's truck sped off to avoid a police roadblock and crashed into a snowbank down the road. Limited Beckert's testimony to the arrest with little discussion of Finicum's fatal shooting. State police fired on Finicum after he emerged from his truck, and they said he reached at least twice inside his jacket where he kept a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Interesting that they don't mention that the gun was planted on him after the shooting, but okay. It says, before the trooper took the witness stand, U.S. District Judge Anna J. Brown repeatedly warned the defendants and their lawyers that the circumstances surrounding Finicum's death were off limits. Brown went as far as telling Ryan Bundy that he was forbidden from raising the subject before the jurors and that she would have him removed from the courtroom if he didn't follow her order. Stopped some on the defense side from attempting to raise the matter. The trooper testified that the occupants of the Jeep, Ammon Bundy, McConnell, and Brian Cavalier, complied with orders to step out of the vehicle and walk backward to waiting officers. The only one armed in the Jeep was McConnell, who had a handgun. Cavalier was taken into custody. Beckert drove north to police roadblock. He saw Finicum's truck in the snowbank. I saw a white male with a cowboy hat laying on his back. Beckert testified, estimating that the man's body was about 30 yards south of the Dodge truck. In response to questions from Assistant U.S. Attorney Craig Gabriel on The trooper said he did not see the shooting, but learned later that Finicum had been shot and killed by law enforcement. He testified that he saw police firing plastic canisters from 40mm launchers into Finicum's truck near the roadblock, releasing a powdery irritant similar to pepper spray or tear gas. After some delay, he watched as Ryan Bundy, Victoria Sharp, and Shauna Cox, in that order, emerged one by one from the back of Finicum's truck. He later learned that Ryan Bundy had been taken to a hospital for treatment, possibly for shrapnel, Becker testified. Examination, and Bundy's lawyer, Marcus Mumford, established again that Becker learned that Finicum had been killed by law enforcement. Mumford followed up. In fact, he was shot 3 times in the back. The prosecutor objected, and the judge immediately asked the jurors to disregard. Mumford later brought up Ryan Bundy's wound that was based on another shot from law enforcement into the truck. Mumford began again. Mumford was cut off, and the judge told the jury to disregard his remarks. Jurors, again, we are not litigating here what happened to Mr. Finicum or the extent of the shooting, Brown said. When it was Ryan Bundy's chance to cross-examine the trooper, he was more direct. So the round that was shot into my shoulder, was it lethal or non-lethal? He asked. Objected, and the trooper didn't answer the question. Out of earshot from the jury, Ryan Bundy had urged the court to allow jurors to learn that he was shot by federal snipers who picked up their brass and line repeatedly about their shooting. He argued that the FBI's actions and alleged cover-up of the shooting goes to the bias of the federal agency that was allowed to investigate the refuge occupation. Ryan Bundy accused the government of trying to control the narrative by barring discussion of FBI's deception and what went on there. Gabriel countered that the information was irrelevant since the prosecution team is not calling any of the FBI hostage rescue team agents who are under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice's Inspector General's office. Bias goes to an individual, Gabriel said. It does not go to an entire institution in this case. After taking some time in court to review the evidence and her prior court ruling, Brown denied Ryan Bundy's request. Whatever happened with Mr. Finicum, whether it was justified or not, did not bear on defendants' mental state and their decision to do what they did, which occurred before Finicum was killed, the judge said from her bench. The righteousness of it or not remains irrelevant in this case, Brown said. She further noted that the actions remain under investigation. The judge added that the great weight of evidence the government has presented in the case so far are from the defendant's own statements. It's Ammon Bundy himself in front of a microphone. It's Ryan Bundy himself in front of a microphone, Brown said. Wednesday afternoon, Dutchess County Sheriff's detectives Ron Brown held up the loaded 9mm Ruger semi-automatic handgun that had been left inside the pocket of Finicum's denim jacket. The detective testified that the gun had 1 round in the chamber. He said Oregon State Police forensic scientists person to locate the gun on Finicum. A knife was also found tucked behind the front of Finicum's belt. Well, I think we know how I feel about that, but okay, we'll go on. Found on the floorboard behind the driver's seat in the truck was .38 caliber special revolver containing 5 rounds of ammunition. The gun for jurors, he told them the gun was in plain view inside the truck. Gabriel later showed the photo to the jury of the rounds taken from the weapon. So 2 black Smith & Wesson .223 caliber semi-automatic rifles equipped with scopes from long cardboard boxes and handed them one at a time to Brown to identify. Brown said the rifles were found beneath the back seat of Finicum's truck, each loaded with 25 rounds. One of the rifles had a round in the chamber, he said. The firearms had powder residue from the tactical pepper type spray that police had fired into the truck, breaking doors, windows, the detective said. During cross-examination, Mumford established that there was no sign that the firearms found in Finicum's truck had been recently handled or fired. New, and that's because the FBI planted them there, but hey, they don't want to know the truth. They can't handle the truth. What we have here is off of the NewYorkPost.com. Speaking of scumbags, one is about Anthony Weiner. Does everybody remember Anthony Weiner? of sexting relationship with a 15-year-old girl. Now, for those of you who don't know who he is, Anthony Weiner is the husband of Hillary Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin. Yeah. Disgraced former lawmaker Anthony Weiner had months-long online relationship with a 15-year-old girl whom he asked to dress up in school uniforms and be part of rape fantasies, according to an explosive report on Wednesday. The unidentified high school student claimed she was a sophomore in January when she first connected with the Carlos Danger, politician. DailyMail.com reported. Weiner knew the girl was a minor, and she and her dad, Weiner knew the girl was a minor. She and her dad told the news site of you this AM. Weiner reportedly wrote to her in an instant message app, the handle T-Dog Hard. Chested pictures of himself to the girl and creepily boasted about his prowess. And then he makes a comment here, and I'm going to try to paraphrase it. It says, I would bust that so hard and so often that you would leak and limp for a week, Weiner reportedly wrote. Oh my. The two texted and spoke over Skype, the girl said. Weiner would ask her to dress up in plaid skirts for role-playing with him as a teacher. He had some rape fantasies. It would just be him showing up at my house when my dad was out of town, the girl said, and just start undressing me, being forceful, asking me if I wanted to be dominated. Strange questions. Political career and marriage were destroyed by his online sexual dalliances. The Post reported last month that Weiner was still sexting, prompting his wife, Huma Abedin, to dump him. After months of freaky online chit-chat with Weiner, the girl said she told her teacher about it in April. I was scared. I felt bad for talking to Weiner, the girl said. I felt a little guilty, and I wrote my dad a letter telling him. Still, the girl said she kept up with Weiner until July, with him asking her to write letters saying their relationship wasn't as pervy as text messages showed. After I told my teacher about the relationship, Weiner wanted me to email my dad and my teacher and tell them what I said was false, the girl said, that the conversations were appropriate and were never inappropriate. Helpful. The teen said she wrote letters to satisfy Weiner but sent them to fake email addresses. Found in a fake note, she wrote of Weiner, our online chats were never inappropriate. He was always very helpful and kind. The girl said she came forward after seeing reports in the Post that showed Weiner using his own toddler son as a prop for relationships with women. What he did with his son, having him in the picture that was released, I think that he's very disgusting and he needs help, she said. Weiner was an up-and-coming member of Congress in 2011 when pictures of his bulging manhood emerged, leading to initial claims. He soon came clean, admitting he sent pervy pictures and resigned from office. Despite that humiliating episode, Weiner had a chance to revive his career and was a front runner in the 2013 New York mayoral race. Weiner's sexting compulsion got the better of him as 22-year-old Sydney Leathers came forward in relationship with him. Despite having the most recognizable name in the crowded Democratic field, Weiner finished fifth in his party's primary with less than 5% of the vote, as then public advocate Bill de Blasio skated into Gracie Mansion. And as if that Leathers humiliation wasn't enough, Weiner was back at the 2015 sending of himself to a woman. Weiner's creepy factor went off the charts when he posted his young son alongside him for the picture. Weiner's teen sexting partner claimed she reached out to him first via Twitter on January 23rd. The girl said she did it out of curiosity about his past scandals. KIK exchange, she asked him about his online persona, Carlos Danger, and Weiner jumped on that chance for a cheesy come on. Thing he wrote, I'd like that. Call you something, the girl responded. Weiner allegedly wrote back. The 51-year-old Weiner declined to comment specifically on the flirtatious chit-chats, but admitted to making, you think? I have repeatedly demonstrated terrible judgment about the people I have communicated with online and the things I have sent, he told dailymail.com. I am filled with regret and heartbroken for those I have hurt. He was particularly freaked out that his little girl and Weiner had Skyped. I couldn't stomach that, he said. That really was the worst part, I think, was knowing that inappropriate behavior was available to my daughter by this man. Teen usually chatted about high school activities and her learner's permit. Weiner usually steered conversations toward ice hockey, working out, drive, she said. She recalled one particularly weird Skype rendezvous when Weiner hit on her as his son bathed nearby. Bathtub at the time just downstairs, she said. So he would yell at his son to check on him, and then he'd ask me to take my clothes off and just started saying these really sexual things. The girl said she never saw Weiner naked. He would tell me to say his name as I was touching myself. He would ask me to take my clothes off, have his shirt off, she added. Sometimes he would grab his lower region, but that was about it. Holy smoke. And the next one we have, person. This is off of lifenews.com. Obama administration says you're racist and intolerant if you believe in religious freedom. The Obama administration released a concerning new report this month with recommendations that would chip away at Americans' religious liberty. The lengthy new report came from U.S. Commission on Civil Rights called Peace Coexistence, Reconciling Non-Discrimination Principles with Civil Liberties. Its recommendations that it says would balance religious freedom with non-discrimination laws. However, the recommendations appear to be thinly veiled attempts to deny Americans their First Amendment right to religious freedom. Commission Chairman Julian Castro wrote some very hostile words in his personal statement in the report. And he says, the phrases religious liberty and religious freedom will stand for nothing except hypocrisy so long as they remain code words for discrimination, intolerance, racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, or any form of intolerance. Today, as in the past, religion is being used as both a weapon and shield by those seeking to deny others equality. Religion has been used to justify slavery and later Jim Crow's law. The report recommended that the law and policymakers tailor religious exceptions as narrowly as possible, citing the undue burden that these exceptions place on non-discrimination laws and policies. Another recommendation states federal regulation should be considered to clarify that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act create First Amendment free exercise clause rights only for individuals and religious institutions and only to the extent that they do not unduly burden civil liberties and civil rights protections against status-based discrimination. The commission recommends that the states with the RFRA-style laws do the same. But by doing so, Americans' First Amendment religious freedoms could be severely limited. The recommendations could force family-owned businesses like Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Wood and religious employers like Little Sisters of the Poor to violate their religious beliefs by paying for abortion-causing drugs and possibly even abortions in their employee health plans. In the name of non-discrimination, these recommendations essentially would allow for discrimination against religious individuals and groups. Already are speaking out against the Obama administration and the report's hostile words to people. Catholic Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore said he was shocked by the new report, CNS reports. Chairman Castro's comments reckless and ignorant. He makes the shocking suggestion that Catholic, Orthodox Jewish, Mormon, and Muslim communities are comparable to fringe segregationists from the civil rights era. The Archbishop continued, "Can we imagine the civil rights movement without Reverend Martin Luther King, Friar Theodore Hesburgh, and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Herschel?" Lori said that attacks on religious groups will hurt the poor and vulnerable, such as those helped by religious organizations across the country. Chairman Castro and his friends won't be the ones to suffer, the Archbishop said. The vast majority of those who speak up for religious liberties are merely asking for the freedom to serve others as our faith asks of us, he continued. We ask that the works of our institutions be carried out by people who believe in our mission and respect witness. The Federalist writer Nicholas Siz pointed out, the First Amendment prohibits the government from establishing a religion, but when the federal government declares ideas that everyone held until 5 minutes ago, supported by reason and lived out with compassion, as de facto hateful and criminal, first they came for the photographers and the bakers. Then the government is essentially creating a new public faith and forcing everyone to adhere to it. The current administration's hostility toward Christianity is clear, and Christians must be prepared to face it. So, you know, while they're distracting you with Anthony Weiner, this is going on. Have here is off of the economic collapse was a gateway to the Temple of Baal is going up in New York City's park on Monday. If you tried to put a large cross in a public park in New York City, there would be lawsuits flying all over the place. But apparently an ancient that served as a gateway to the Temple of Baal is on Monday, September the 19th, a constructed version of the Palmyra's Arch of Triumph, also known as the Monumental Arch, will be erected in New York City. Specifically, it will be located in City Hall Park in Manhattan. Behind the project is known as the Institute for Digital Archaeology, and they have confirmed the location and the date on their official website. It was originally constructed in Palmyra, Syria, by the Roman Emperor Sempius Severus in the 3rd century AD, and it stood there until it was destroyed by ISIS in 2015. The following Wikipedia article about the arch, and it says the monumental arch, called the Arch of Triumph or the Arch of Sempius Severus, was Roman ornamental archway in Palmyra, Syria. It was built in the 3rd century during the reign of Emperor Sempius Severus. Its ruins later became one of the main attractions of Palmyra until it was destroyed by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in October of 2015. Most of its stonework still survives, and there are plans to rebuild it using NS, I think is how it's pronounced. And then they have a map here to see how the city was laid out and where the arch was identified. It says those that are familiar with ancient Middle Eastern deities know that Bel and Baal that were one and the same. And then explains that here in a Wikipedia statement. It says Bel, signifying Lord or Master, is a title rather than genuine name applied to various gods in Mesopotamia region, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylonia. The feminine form, lady, mistress. Bel is represented in Greek as Belos and in Latin as Belus. The Bel is an ascetic Semitic form, cognate with Northwest Semitic Baal with the same meaning. Back in April, the arch that stood directly in front of the Temple of Baal was supposed in Times Square, but fortunately that project was ultimately canceled. A reproduction of the Arch of Triumph, the arch discussed in this article, was put up in, what is that, Trafalgar Square in London at that time, and there were rumblings that a reproduction of the Arch of Triumph would also come to New York at a later date. It's now become reality. So why are people getting so upset about some ancient arch that may be connected to an ancient god that nobody seems to worship anymore? Well, the truth is that Baal, as mentioned in the Bible more than 100 times, very high percentage of current world religions can be traced directly back to this ancient deity and to ancient Babylon. And the practices involved in ancient Baal worship are eerily similar to things that go on in society today. The following comes from an excellent article by Matt Barber. Ritualistic Baal worship in the Sun looked a little like this. Adults would gather around the altar of Baal. Infants would then be burned alive as sacrificial offering to the deity amid horrific screams and stench of charred human flesh. Congregants, men and women alike, would engage in bisexual orgies. The ritual of convenience was intended to produce economic prosperity by prompting Baal to bring rain for the fertility of Mother Earth. The natural consequences of such behavior, pregnancy and childbirth, and the associated financial burdens of unplanned parenthood were easily offset. To choose to engage in homosexual conduct or with child sacrifice available on demand, could simply take part in another fertility ceremony to terminate the unwanted child. Modern liberalism deviates little from its ancient predecessor, while its macabre rituals have been sanitized with flowery and emphatic terms of art. Its core tenets and practices remain eerily similar. We tend to think that we are vastly advanced, that the pagan idol worshippers of the ancient world, but is that really the case? They killed their babies by thousands, and we have killed our babies by the millions. They have free love, Baal, but we have turned it into a permanent lifestyle. Multitudes would gather around the altars of Baal to watch the bisexual orgies, but we have turned watching others having sex into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Just like ancient Israel, our society has turned away from following the God that created all things, and instead we are embracing the ways of the ancient pagan world. Unfortunately, there are very serious consequences for doing this. Just consider what Jonathan Cahn recently told George during an interview on Coast to Coast. Western civilization was once totally pagan, and then, in a sense, Khan said, but what one of these mysteries is saying is if it turns back away from God and turns to evil and immortality or immorality, it's going to be 7 times worse than it was before. And how does that translate? Is before you had the gospel, you had Nero, you had Caligula. But when you have a post-Christian civilization, it's much more dangerous than a pre-Christian one. That's when you produce Hitlers, you produce Stalins, you produce ultimately the Antichrist. That's end-time prophecy, that as well. I believe that it's quite appropriate that the arch that once served as a gateway to the Temple of Baal is going up in New York City on Monday, because we are going down the exact same path that ancient Israel once did. Doing the same things that they once did, our ultimate fate is very similar as well. And then it says that there's an update. It says the arch has now been unveiled, and you can see the video of the unveiling in a video here. I'm going to try to do a screen share on this. Wait just a second. Let me Let me check that. Yeah, this is an 11-minute video. We're going to run over a little bit today. I'll go ahead and see if I can screen share this bad boy for you. We'll take a look at what they're doing. And poke that and poke this. And then we'll poke this. Get this to blow up so we can watch it. Well, and we may not be able to play it. Well, okay, we'll just leave that for you all to see then. Play that at your leisure. Holy smoke. So they've got that thing going in New York City. And we wonder why there's bombings and stuff going on, and, you know, let's just open the portals. Wow. The next one that we have here is trying to play an ad, which we will try to stop. There we go. This is off of beforeitsnews.com, and this is one for my scientific friends, and it says success over 6 kilometers, new record set, collaboration between quantum scientists and City of Calgary sets a distance record for teleporting a photon over fiber network. What if you could behave crew on the Starship Enterprise and teleport yourself home or anywhere else in the world? As a human, you're probably not going to realize this anytime soon. If you're a photon, you might want to keep reading. Collaboration between the University of Calgary and the City of Calgary researchers in the United States, a group of physicists led by Wolfgang Tittel, professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Calgary, have successfully demonstrated teleportation of a photon, an elementary particle of light, over a straight line distance of 6 kilometers using the City of Calgary's fiber optic cable infrastructure. The project began with an seed grant in 2014. And then it goes on down here and says this accomplishment, which set the record for distance of transferring quantum state by teleportation, has landed the research a spot in the prestigious Nature Photonics scientific journal. The finding was published back-to-back with similar demonstrations by a group of Chinese researchers that you can click on to read about that. It says such a network will enable secure communication without having to worry about eavesdropping and allow distant quantum computers to connect, says Tittle. Experimentation draws on spooky action at a distance. On the entanglement property of quantum mechanics, also known as spooky action property, so mysterious, Einstein could come to terms with it. Entangled means that the two photons that form an entangled pair have properties that, regardless of how the two are separated, explains Tittle. Let's stop that. When one of the photons was sent over to City Hall, it remained entangled with the photon that stayed at the University of Calgary. Next, the photons who stayed to the university was generated in Calgary, and then it also traveled to City Hall, where it met the photon that was part of the entangled pair. And this goes on if you want to read more about this, but wow, I found that absolutely amazing. Teleportation. This much in our lifetimes on that. And for you younger people, wow, you know, you may actually be able to, you know, teleport one of these days. And then the last one I have for you is your kind of feel-good thing. This is Mark Wahlberg, the Dan Patrick Show, and his daughter couldn't be more embarrassed. I got a charge out of this. Mark Wahlberg stopped by the Dan Patrick Show with his 13-year-old daughter Ella on Wednesday, where the actor resurrected his rapping days. In the middle of a conversation that initially focused on sports and Wahlberg's upcoming movie, Deepwater Horizon, Ella chimed in with a special request and said, "Dad, I want to hear you rap right now," she demanded. But not in the way Ella was hoping. It's great to be a parent, isn't it? He says, "I'm your 45-year-old father, and I got to rap. And if you keep misbehaving, I'll give your behind a slap," Wahlberg rapped to Ella's dismay. Thanking. Later on in life, you're going to thank me because all the advice I'm giving you is good for you. And if not, your button behind's going to be black and blue. Mortified, the teenager signaled to her father to cut it by waving her hand in front of her throat. And he says, "Don't cut it down. We're giving you positive encouragement raps. It's good information to help you behave, and then you're going to earn back that phone, girl." Two-time Oscar nominee revealed that he recently disciplined Ella by taking her phone privileges away. As the oldest of four, Wahlberg's wife and Rhea Durham are also parents to Michael, age 10, Brendan, age 8, and Grace, age 6. Ella argued the fairness of her punishment, and she says, "But my brothers or anything didn't lose their iPad when they were bad," Ella said. And he says, "If I took their iPads, they wouldn't care. They just throw a ball or bounce their head off the wall and they'd still be happy. You live for the phone, so I got to get you where it counts, kid." At the same time, Wahlberg also knows what will make Ella's day, like a visit from One Direction's Harry Styles. "Young lad, and he was sitting in my living room," he recalled. "I was like, whoa, what are you doing here?" I got a charge out of that. Good parenting, good parenting. You got to get them where it hurts when you want to make them mind. You know, if they're into that phone, you take the phone away. You know, whatever it is, that's what you have to stop to get their attention. My dad used to say, sometimes you got to knock the mule down to get their attention, and you know, there's a lot of truth in that. You got to get their attention. Oh, so there's your giggle for the day. Your feel good, and you know, good parenting. We've got to teach them respect. Yeah, we're going to turn you loose for today. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it. And let's get the word out there and let people know what's actually going on in the world. They sit there thinking that what they say on mainstream is and it couldn't be further from the truth. So tomorrow will be Memorex edition. Please listen because it will be news, you know, even though it's on Memorex. And go out this afternoon, get you some fresh air, kick your shoes off, stick your feet down in the grass, curl up your toes good, balance yourself. Maybe even take a nap this afternoon if you can get away with it. I'm going to be a little busy, and I'll see you back here on Monday. Bye.